You're listening to the Dad Whisperer podcast with Dr. Michelle Watson Canfield. Be sure to follow her on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. You can find out more about Dr. Michelle at drmichellewatson.com. That's drmichellewatson.com. Here now is your host, Dr. Michelle Watson Canfield.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Dad Whisperer podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Michelle Watson Canfield. And if you're a dad who wants to add more tools to your fathering toolbox so that you can be the father you want to be and that your daughter needs you to be, then you've come to the right place. And I tell you, I am in a season where I'm feeling renewed and revived. Maybe it has something to do with heading into summer and longer days with light and flowers blooming and all those good things. But I'm telling you, I'm updating my website. I'm adding more resources right there on my homepage. And dads, I just want you to know I am all about giving you more resources. I've got 2 books. Here you got the podcast. Every other Friday, I've got Dad-Daughter Friday blogs. Lots of free resources there. I love doing podcasts. I've been doing a lot of interviews lately where I'm joining with other leaders around the nation to talk about all things fathers, all things dads and daughters. And I just look forward to times, even now that the pandemic is coming to a close, where we can meet in person. So, hey, invite me to a venue. I'll come meet you. We'll shake hands. We'll talk about all these kinds of important things that have to do with relational dynamics between you and your daughters. Well, you know the grid each week, but let me review it for any of those that are new, which is simply on your mark, get set, go. Dad, picture yourself standing there, picture the track, right? Everybody's doing loops. Really, I love thinking of it more kind of not only as a marathon, but a little bit of, one of those kinds of races where you're on a team, you're handing off a baton, and we're in it together. I'm on the sidelines as your coach, cheering you on and saying, on your mark, get set, go. On your mark is the topic or the theme. Get set is filling that in with stories and stats. And go is always your practical action step so that you can put your love for your daughters and even your sons into action. And I love how many of you will say, you know what? My wife, my ex-wife, my sister, they're all daughters too. Exactly. The things you learn here apply to any of the relationships in your lives. And I'm telling you, I recently did a Parent University, an all-day conference for dads and moms. And I think what I loved is that I was hearing from some of them, like, where do we hear this stuff about, how to tune into our inner world and how to have more relational skills? Well, the good news is it's usually in podcasts if you're not prone to want to go to a therapist's office. But I want to bring you things that I teach clients in the trenches, in my counseling office, day after day, year after year. Here I'm 27 years in the field already. And I want to make this practical, relatable, and action-oriented so that you can put those tools from your toolbox into action. Because think about it, you don't want to keep your toolbox in the shed and never use the tools in it, right? Well, same here. If you want to be an engaged dad, a dialed-in dad, I want you to be taking these tools out of your toolbox and putting them into action so that you connect with your daughter's heart and grow your own skill set by using those tools. Well, today on your mark, the title is Walking with Your Daughter Through Grief, Loss, and Death. Whoa, heavy, right? That's a pretty intense title. But the reason that I want to talk about that today is that this whole idea of where father wounds or father voids happen, they shape us because injury limits mobility. Okay, say that out loud with me right now. Injury limits mobility, right? We know that physically, if we have an injury in our body, everything slows down and caters to the wound. When it comes to father wounds, which are those places where we're hurt, or father voids, which are absences, that's what shapes all of our lives. But specifically talking about you and your daughter, this means that when your daughter carries wounds or absences from how you do or don't meet her in the trenches, that affects a lot of her decision making, a lot of how she relates to you. And I want to bring you some practical ways, Dad, that you can be more intentional to pace with your daughter in areas where she's sad, she's grieving over loss. It could be loss of a pet, loss of a friend, loss of a job, loss of a relationship. And then sometimes death, which could be, again, loss, death of a pet, loss and death of a friendship, because sometimes those go hand in hand, don't they? And so I want to walk you through and talk you through some ways to understand this concept, maybe from two vantage points. One is understanding your own self and what's getting triggered when you see your daughter in distress. And the second part is really taking the time to understand how to better relate to her when she's in an intensely sad place of loss and death. Okay. Well, how many of you, here's my question for you, were raised in a family where you heard expressions like, okay, real men don't cry, or something to the effect of like, okay, you're a sissy if you show weakness? I mean, most men I've talked with say that this pretty much is the message they got growing up. You've heard me talk about my dad, south side of Chicago. I mean, it was survival of the fittest. My dad was in gangs from the time he was 12. I mean, it really was a culture where you had to show up, step up, toughen up, grit your teeth and bear it. And that has obviously shaped how my dad has raised me. The messages I got a lot were attitude determines altitude, and there's truth to that, no doubt. But so often it's the timing of when something like that is said. He would often say, right thinking produces right living. Again, totally 100% solid truth, right? But when I was in the middle of a meltdown and really hurting, to get what I would call a head response instead of a heart response where I'm given information, that right thinking, it was really more about my dad not having a skill set of knowing how to pace with my emotional intensity than it was about him being insensitive. I know he wasn't trying to be, but I heard that as basically him saying, stop crying, buck up, you're a wuss, something to that effect. And that got internalized for me because I didn't know what to do with the way I was wired. Maybe you have a daughter who's super on one end of the spectrum, super emotional, or on the other end of the spectrum, super shut down. Well, Dad, you get to model then to your daughter, even sometimes by letting her see you tear up over something that disappoints you or makes you sad, rather than just going to anger. We're going to talk about that in a few minutes. So here's what I want to go back to, men, is my heart really truly breaks for those of you that have had the type of conditioning that really gave you the message that men don't cry. I mean, you know that I love the Word of God. Let me ask you this. Where is that verse in the Bible? If you can show it to me, I'll track with you here. There's not a verse that says men shouldn't cry, only women should. Men shouldn't feel, only women should. Nope, we're all made in the image of a God who shows emotion. One of my favorite books is The Wisdom of Your Heart by my friend Mark Alan Shelsky. I've partnered with him before. He's been on the podcast. He and I have co-hosted some radio programs, and this guy runs deep. Here's the subtitle of his book. So The Wisdom of Your Heart is the subtitle, Discovering the God-Given Purpose and Power of Your Emotions. And what I love is that he walks through a foundation, a starting point of saying God himself shows emotion. So if we're made in his image, let's just start there of shifting our mindset to say emotions aren't bad. And I think sometimes without even realizing it, in our family of origin or even in the church, maybe among friends, we get a message that only happy emotions are acceptable and good. And anything on the other side of the spectrum, sadness, fear, anger, let's kind of compartmentalize those. And then what happens is when we do that, those emotions come out all the little open portals in our vault or in our safe or in the basement of our lives. We're trying to lock it away as best we can, but it really doesn't work. Bottom line. I'm sure I hear an amen. And for a lot of men, those quote unquote softer emotions come out through the anger portal. So those sad emotions weren't allowed as a kid. So now it's like they just come out as anger. And so sometimes as a dad, when your daughter is hurting and she's in a place of grief and loss, you want her to just kind of move through it quickly because you're getting triggered. And your discomfort then is really wanting her to shut down or speed up. And that doesn't help you pace with her and give her freedom to know that you're in it with her, that you are there as a sounding board, even as somebody that can really, in a way, put your arms around her to create space where she's allowed to go through a process. And you've heard me talk about this before, men, but that is often where the players, who I call dudes and duds, will show up to say, I'm here to give you my time, but oftentimes they have a hidden agenda, which again underscores why I'm here, man, to say, I want to teach you and talk to you about how to build your skill set, add more tools to your toolbox. And another way that we say that in my field of psychology is we want to expand your window of tolerance. So to be able to tolerate longer spaces of silence, of sitting with her, of pacing with her, and of letting her feel is also going to help you grow. So when it comes to walking alongside your daughter and connecting at a heart level, right? Your heart has to turn, God said, not just your head, toward her through her pain, through her grief, through her loss. The best gift you can give her is to stay with her through, say that word with me, through her emotional process. So it's not about speeding it up, as I was just saying. So for most of us, grief does not have an expiration date. So that whole idea of pacing with her is really important to understand here at the front end, and really to have a mindset that says, okay, keep hearing me on your shoulder saying through, go through. You're not going around, you're not going under, you're not going over. I mean, do you remember that as a kid going on a bear hunt, going on a lion hunt, where you tap your knees back and forth, going on a lion hunt, going on a lion hunt. I'm not afraid, right? But then it says can't go around it. Can't go over it, can't go under it. Gotta go what? Through it. What a profound children's game that we used to play. It has so much truth now for us as adults. How do we go through it? Well, the way we grow is we go through it with someone else. We pace with them in their grief, in their loss, and then we grow and they receive a forever gift because we're there with them in their pain. In fact, a concept that I love that ties to this is the term trauma bond. Trauma bond. Maybe you've heard of it. It's the strongest bond that two people can have. They bond by going through trauma together. So think about it. During 9/11, those that had never met each other, that were stuck together, huddled up in stairwells for hours or days, a forever bond was formed because in their fear, in their sadness, in their terror, someone was right there, maybe not with any more answers than they had or any more ideas about how to get through it or escape, but just by being together in all of those emotional, intense realities, they bond for life. That's what I want for you, Dad, for your daughter to bond with you through life. Some of that means developing a better skill set on your end of how to sit with her during trauma, loss, grief, death. Does that make sense? When it comes to working through death losses, I just want to mention this, is I've talked with widows, with widowers. I'm married to a man who was married for over 42 years, lost his wife, 5 kids. We now have our 16th grandkid on the way. All that idea of grief and loss is something that he has personally walked through. One of my closest friends, she's been on the program, Bo Stern Brady, husband died, 6-year process of ALS. I've talked with men and women that have been on both sides of grief and loss. And what they often say is that after the aftermath of the death, people don't know what to say. So oftentimes people will say, if you need anything, let me know. It doesn't work. You want to say, could I bring you a gift? Could I bring you a meal? Could I bring you a Starbucks? I'm going to do it right now. What flavor do you want? What drink do you want? I'm at Starbucks right now, and you text and you bring it. So if you have a daughter that's in deep grief, sometimes just texting and saying, hey, can I drop off? And you think of her favorite drink or food, and you drop it off where she is rather than having her come up with what she needs or wants. Because just to understand the brain, when someone is in grief and loss, that mid part of their brain is called, the limbic system, the hippocampus, the amygdala. That's their emotional center. When that area is on fire, what it does is it floods. That's the word we use. It comes over the front part of the brain, and this frontal part, the forehead, that's called the prefrontal cortex, is where we think and reason and have judgment and make decisions. That part's offline. So when you are there with your daughter and want to ask her questions like, now explain that to me again. Tell me, what do you mean? Now, how did they hurt you? And you're trying to fix it. You're asking her to somehow come back online with the frontal part of her cortex, which can't just happen by answering questions. Because in that moment when she's flooded, by being with her, pacing with her, maybe putting a hand on her knee or her leg or her ankle, something that maybe a safe way to calm and ground and pace with you and tune with her. She's pacing with you, you're pacing with her, you're attuning with her, she's attuning to you. That's what's going to help her midbrain calm down. And that's what parents do with crying babies. You don't sit there and have a rational discussion. No, you find a way to rock, to pace with that baby, to calm that arousal system down. Well, it's the same with us as big kids. We're doing the exact same thing now. And I want to encourage you, Dad, by doing that, you will be living out the truth of Isaiah 58, 11 and 12. Here's what it says. The Lord will guide you always. He will satisfy your needs in a sun-scorched land, right? Some of us feel like when we're in a really tough place, we're out there getting a sunburn. And it says, the Lord will strengthen your frame, but here's where it switches. I love the shift. It says, because of that happening, out of that overflow of God meeting you, you will be like a well-watered garden, like a spring whose waters never fail. Your people will rebuild the ancient ruins and raise up the age-old foundations. You will be called a restorer of streets with dwellings and a repairer of broken walls. See, so that idea of rebuilding and raising up and restoring and repairing is up to us out of the overflow of how God has done that with us. And that's what I want for you men to be able to do with your daughters. Well, we're going to take a quick break. When I come back, I'm going to give you some practical action steps and read to you from my friend Mark Alan Shelsky's book so that you can hear from another dad who has been in the trenches and done some of his own internal work to cheer you on. We'll be right back.
Are you a dad who has ever desired a deeper connection with your daughter, but haven't known how to go about it? Let's Talk Conversation Starters for Dads and Daughters is the very resource you need. Dr. Michelle wrote it with you dads in mind. This book will support you with scripted questions, equip you to decode your daughter, and inspire you with stories of other dads and daughters. Don't wait any longer to be the hero you want to be and that your daughter needs you to be. So, to let the talking begin, head on over to drmichellewatson.com/books and order your copy today. This book will become a favorite in your fathering toolbox and will give you the answers you've been looking for. That's drmichellewatson.com/books. Now, back to the Dad Whisperer podcast.
Welcome back to the Dad Whisperer podcast. I'm Dr. Michelle Watson Canfield, your host. And today's On Your Mark, Get Set, Go is walking with your daughter through grief, loss, and death. That's the On Your Mark, Get Set. I've already been sharing some ideas with you. And the go step, Dad, be listening now in this section for one way that you can do something different to step into your daughter's world. Because if she hasn't been this week in a place of facing pain and loss and grief and maybe even death of a relationship, a vision, a job, a friendship, I guarantee she'll be facing one soon. And so this will put some tools in your toolbox to prepare for that. I'm going to read to you a little bit out of my friend's book, The Wisdom of Your Heart, from my friend Mark. He has a section called You Can't Run Forever. Subtitle, Why Are We So Disconnected? Great question, isn't it? Because here's what he said. Many religious communities see self-discipline, self-control, and doing the right thing as markers of spiritual maturity. We've taken these lessons to heart, accepting emotions as second-class citizens in the mature and responsible soul. As if that isn't enough, painful life circumstances taught many of us that powerful emotions are trouble. He said, perhaps like me, you've experienced profound loss or trauma that disrupted your childhood. Maybe you were abused or experienced enormous loss in some other way. A friend of mine who experienced shocking abuse as a child once told me the implicit motto of his life had become don't talk, don't trust, don't feel. He goes on to say, we learned from our culture, from our institutions, and from our own painful emotions and experiences. Almost like our emotions are talking back to us in those experiences. Does that make sense? They're crying out. We're talking back saying, shut up, don't feel, go down, right? Be put away. But he says that his friend Matthew Elliott wrote in his book, simply titled Feel, these words. For years, we've been taught by our culture and in our churches that emotions are not to be trusted, that reason and knowledge and logic are the firm foundation on which to build our faith and our spiritual lives. So Mark goes on to say, if this is true, then living a spiritual life means practicing self-control, managing our emotions instead of letting them manage us. And he says, to be fair, okay, there's something to that idea. But he goes on to really admit, haven't we all made terrible decisions based on how we felt at the time? Of course we have. So it's a balance. I always say 1 foot on the thinking track, 1 foot on the feeling track. But when both feet are on the feeling track, we can't be scared into jumping over to the other one or jumping off the emotion track. It's going through it is the best way to have balance in our life. Mark ends that chapter by saying, God created us as whole beings, body, mind, and spirit, and all of that was made in God's image. So let me be clear, this includes your emotions. And in case you have never heard that before, I'll repeat it. Your emotions are made in God's image too. Isn't that good? So good. And I will read you one more part where he talks about the power of anger. Because again, by and large, this is where men have told me they struggle. Anger, anger, anger. All of the softer emotions, sadness, fear, confusion, are coming out the anger or the mad portal. Sad and mad, two sides of the same coin. So Dad, that may be you, where you're like, I can't do the soft emotions, so I do what I think are the strong emotion. The one strong emotion, anger. Too many men have done damage to their daughters' hearts through anger than anything else, men. And even this week, before I read Mark's chapter here, I just want to say that I actually, in the last week, had a short video go viral. It's almost at 2 million views in a little over a week. And all I did in this interview with my friend Jim Ramos of Men in the Arena, they took this one video clip where all I said was, Dad, your anger destroys your daughter's spirit. It shuts her down. It crushes the core of who she is. It causes her to want to give up. And your anger makes her believe that she's unlovable and not worthy. That's what happens with your anger. I have no idea why this thing has blown up like it has because I've said it before. But right now, this is a topic for some reason that is really resonating with people. And I love how one guy actually wrote a comment. I looked at this just this morning. He said, expletive, I really need to hear this, and I'm going to start working on this right now. Thanks so much for sharing this. Isn't that good? Dad, we've all got to work on this. And I've told you before, I'm prone to anger is a really easy one for me to go to. So I'm preaching to the choir here, to myself, not just to you. But here's what Mark said about the power of anger. He said, for a long time, anger was the only high-intensity emotion I could feel. Perhaps it's more accurate to say that all high-intensity emotion felt like anger to me. Something would happen that should have made me sad or afraid, but instead, I just felt angry. Even now, after years of counseling and hard work, I will sometimes find myself angry and have to slowly unpack my thoughts to discover the other emotions waiting to be heard beneath anger's fiery armor. Isn't that good? Isn't that profound? He's learned now to slow down and unpack what's underneath it by sitting with himself, sitting with that emotion. And Dad, I would encourage you, here's an action step. When you notice you're ready to blow on a 0 to 10 scale of an 8, 9, or 10, walk away. And I always say, take as many minutes to calm down as you are old. If you're 50 years old, you got to take 50 minutes to calm down. Maybe you've heard of Peter Scacero's book, Emotionally Healthy Spirituality. You know what he says? Emotional health and spiritual maturity are inseparable. It's not possible to be spiritually mature while remaining emotionally immature. So a way to grow in emotional, I would say, skill building and acuity and sensitivity and strength and health is to calm down when you notice the anger's coming up. Remove yourself, go out to your car, sit in the car and sit there, do that lion hunt, bear hunt, back and forth, tap on your legs, back and forth, right and left. It's like you're doing like a baby where you're kind of self-soothing by calming your whole body's arousal system by tapping right and left, and then ask Holy Spirit, ask Jesus to give you insight. What actually is going on that I'm sad about or scared about? Especially when you think about your daughter. You might get angry that she, is dating that guy, or have a blow up that she disrespected mom, but then you're angry at her anger and you're disrespecting her for disrespecting mom, and it's a train wreck. So take a time out, go somewhere, get alone, and ask yourself what's going on. And if you don't know, ask God to give you some insight. I guarantee, man, it will make a difference. Here's another practical action step, Dad. All you have to say to your daughter is, I know I don't understand. Help me understand. I know I don't understand. Can you help me understand? You can even text that to her, because remember, in the heat of the moment, words are 7% of the interaction are verbal. 93% of that interaction is nonverbal. So if there's a big blow up and your tone of voice is intense, your body language is perhaps overpowering to her, maybe she's on her bed crying and you walk in and all you're doing is standing there, but she sees that power differential in real time, like you're trying to say, can you stop it, And I get that that's real life, man. I get that. I am not trying to now disrespect you by saying don't help guide your daughter down off the ledge. That's what I call it. She's kind of walked up and she's ready to jump. Again, emotionally speaking, not, figuratively, not literally there. But remember, as you trauma bond with her, going through that intensity with her, attuning to what's going on with her, she will more and more connect with you, and you'll notice she'll calm down. You'll notice she'll calm down as you change your tone of voice, your body language comes down. You may want to squat, go to the car, go somewhere where you can calm first, and then you'll be able to pull that off and say, honey, I don't understand. Help me understand. Or text that to her. That takes out the body language, write it on a note, put it under her door. I remember years ago where we had to put one of our dogs, this cute Cocker Spaniel named Barney, we'd had him in our family forever, went on vacations with us, and my dad and I were the two that decided we had to take him to the pound. He was just beginning to fall apart. And I'm feeding him Junior Mints and Rolos because he always wanted chocolate, but you can't give that to a dog, but who cared now? So he's in the front seat and tears are coming down my cheeks. And my dad just said, I can't take care of you and the dog, as the tears are there. And I just looked at him and said, Dad, again, I was a therapist by this point. I go, Dad, I don't need you to take care of me. This isn't me needing you to take care of me. I'm feeling my feelings. And so, Dad, maybe that's something you'll take to heart today, is when your daughter is feeling intense emotion and you're there with her, like my dad was there with me in the car. I didn't need him to take care of my emotions. I didn't ask for that. But what that was telling me is he couldn't handle my tears because he was holding back his own. What would that have been like if he let tears come down his cheek? I would have known we were bonding together rather than he's holding it all together. And I know a lot of you are doing that, thinking you have to hold it together or both of you are going to be falling apart. I would encourage you to give that a try to do it different. Pull that tool out saying, okay, instead of biting my tongue and gritting my teeth and holding back the tears, what if I let myself sit with my daughter and let some tears come down my cheek? You're going to trauma bond in a new way. I guarantee it. Okay, I want to close by giving you some practical questions that you can ask your daughter if she's in a time where she's in an intense place, experiencing grief, experiencing loss, maybe even death. Here's what you could say to her. And I do have this written in my book, Let's Talk, Conversation Starters for Dads and Daughters, where you can talk to your daughter in the Lead Her to Lament section, which my husband, Ken Canfield, has said he thinks that's the most important chapter in the whole book because those wounds affect everything. Like I said at the beginning, injury limits mobility. So if your daughter isn't free to move in the world because of internal injuries, maybe from you need to make amends, but it could be loss and grief outside of your home. It could be divorce that's happened, that she's having to live in 2 different places and doesn't want to tell you. Now is the time to listen as you ask her questions so that she can release what's inside through words. And if she doesn't want to talk about it, you could run this off. You could take a screenshot. You could send it to her in a text. You could come up with a way to ask one question, let her text you back, write it out, email it out. There's always ways to find, I would say, an open door to communication if you are intentional about it. So all you need to do is say, honey, I know this has been a hard season since losing, and then you fill in the blank. I've also learned that when we put words to our feelings, it helps us not only honor the loss, but it helps us know that what we're going through matters and we're not in it alone. And I would love to be with you in your sadness. Would you be willing to let me ask you some questions? So before you ask the questions, you're asking her permission to ask the questions. Does that make sense? So you could start by saying something like, I know when we lose someone or something or a dream that we've had, that we're never the same. Especially if it's death, you're going to say that. We're never the same. But I would love to talk with you and reminisce about what value that person had. Now, your daughter may not be able to go to a quote unquote happy place. She might go, Dad, I don't want to talk about what they meant. That's just going to make me more sad. You could say, but what if we did it together? What if we went back and forth and I, contributed if you happen to know that pet or that friend or that guy or that job? You do it with her. But again, if she says, Dad, I don't like that question, no problem. Go on. Here's the second one. You could say, what are some of the toughest things about having that person gone, that pet gone, that job gone, that guy gone, that relationship gone? Next one, what do you miss the most? That's a great question. So Dad, maybe one of these you're hearing can be the one question you text or ask. Next one, when is it the hardest? So you've heard me talk about who, what, when, where, how, why you want to use sparingly. Those are the things I'm right now giving you. When is it the hardest? Is it at night? Is it in the day? Is it in the morning? Is it at a certain place? Where is it the hardest? When is it the hardest? You could even say, if you could say anything to that person right now, what would you want to say? What would you want to ask? Another question, do you ever get mad at God for this loss? See, you could open that up by letting your daughter know that it's okay to be angry at God, sad, and blame God. He can handle all of it, right? Here's another one. You could say, whenever we've loved someone or something, they have left a forever deposit, or that job has left a forever deposit, or that experience or that animal has left a forever deposit in our life. So you could say, what forever gift have you been given by that person, if it's a positive, so to speak, relationship? And last, is there any way I can be more sensitive to you and to your feelings of grief and sadness right now? Is there any way I can be more sensitive to you? So there you go. You might have to listen to this again so that you've got some of those questions in mind and in view. But Dad, I trust that this conversation today has given you some practical ways to not only tune into your internal world as your daughter is experiencing grief and loss, perhaps even death, but that you also have some tools in your toolbox to pace differently and more strategically with your daughter. Well, On Your Mark today has been walking with your daughter through grief, loss, and death. Get set, giving you lots of practical action steps shared from my friend Mark so you could hear from another guy who's in it with you. And lots of ideas throughout this conversation that I encourage you right now to pick one of them, just one, and put it into action right now. Well, this wraps up another week's program. It's been so good to be with all of you here.
Thanks for joining us for another edition of the Dad Whisperer podcast with Dr. Michelle Watson Canfield. To find out how you can invite Dr. Michelle for your next event, go to drmichellewatson.com and click on the speaking tab. That's drmichellewatson.com. Dr. Michelle loves bringing practical insights she gleaned over the past few decades to audiences of teenagers, young adults, men's groups, or women's forums. Once again, go to drmichellewatson.com. That's drmichellewatson.com for more information on the books, resources, and blogs that she has available. Remember, you can listen to the Dad Whisperer podcast on Stitcher, Spotify, Google Play, and Apple Podcasts. And we'd appreciate it if you'd subscribe and leave us a review. Thanks for joining us today, and we'll see you again on the next edition of the Dad Whisperer podcast with Dr. Michelle Watson Canfield.